Hello everyone, my name is Timothy Lee Grant. We are going to be looking into how to perform unit tests and all sorts of tests within Java. So, last video that I made a couple hours ago, I was able to actually successfully get some tests to pass. And so this is working, but I don't know what's going on. I have no idea about any of what I actually did. All I did was I took what I found in from what Copilot told me to do. I put it into my file structure and I kind of did that. That's all I've done. So now the task comes, okay, well, we have a working unit. Now it's time to actually try to understand what's going on. Okay, so now we have our golden copy. We can start the investigation phase of this to try to understand how is it actually working and what's going on. So I am going to reopen Copilot here. Copilot, okay. Well, that is doing its thing. I have this control or this test um, class. Yeah, test class. I annotated it with web MVC test. Okay, greeting controller class. All right. Auto wired. Okay. So this is going to tell Maven to create this instance, I think. Okay. And then I have a greeting service here, which this is like X'd out. Okay. And then I annotate this as a test. So here's one test. And it seems like, okay, there's only one test. Why did it say that there was multiple tests? So when I did this, it ran and it said that there were 3 tests. Okay, so test run 3, failure 0, error 0, skipped 0. So it says that there's 3 tests, but I'm only seeing 1. Okay. So I'm trying to think of all of the questions that I have because I feel like there's a lot of stuff going on. Okay. So I have this one test. Are there any other tests? I have this test here. Spring Boot test. Okay. That's in service. And then I have greeting service test. Okay, so here are my 3 tests. Wow, okay, so I have 3 tests. What are they doing? How are they interacting with each other? Okay. So, demo application tests. Com examples demo. Test context loads. Spring Boot test. Okay, I'm just gonna copy this here. So paste that into there. Okay, and this is one package. Okay. Then I have here. I'm gonna copy this one. Paste it into here. And then I'm going to copy this one. And paste it into here. And I'm going to say, here are my 3 test items. I am trying to understand what each one is doing. Okay. So let's have it go through and let us know what's happening here. Okay, so I'm working with a Spring Boot application and have written 3 different test classes. Each one has a distinct purpose in testing different layers of my application. Okay, so number 1, this one, this one, demo application tests, application context test. Okay. Spring Boot test. Spring Boot test. Okay. Class demo application test. Test. Okay, yeah. Purpose. This is a smoke test to verify that the Spring application context loads without errors. It ensures that your application is correctly configured and all the beans can be created. Okay. Why it matters. If this test fails, it usually means there's a fundamental problem with your Spring configuration. Missing beans, misconfigured properties, okay? So this will fail only in the situation that my application doesn't launch, I think. Okay. How can I test that? Let's see. Let me come to this. Maybe my session? No. Not controller. I want this one. And I want to maybe comment that out. Let's see what happens here. Well. Okay. Test run 1. Huh, okay. So my first question is, how would what's this one? Application context test fail? I commented out the line Spring application and run, but my test still passes. Okay. All right. So greeting service test, unit test for service layer. Okay, so greeting service test. Okay. So what's going on here? We have a class of greeting service, yeah. So I'm creating a new object, okay, of greeting service. So I'm calling the constructor, and then I am greeting service dot get greeting. I'm calling this method on this object, and I'm making sure that it equals that. Okay, this one's kind of straightforward. That one makes sense. Although I didn't have any annotation up here, but I had one down here. Okay, so for the greeting service test, I didn't have any annotations at the top of the class, but I have test at the top of the method. The other ones did, though, right? Yeah. the other one did have an annotation at the top of the class. And then paste that in there. Okay. So this one kind of makes sense. This is a unit test. Okay, here's unit test for the greeting service class. It directly tests the logic of getGreeting method without invoking Spring or any other dependencies. Okay. Unit tests are fast and help ensure that your business logic behaves as expected. Okay, cool. So now, 3, greeting controller test. Greeting controller test, this one. This is the big one. Okay. Now, it also has an annotation at the top, but now we're doing something like we're passing in the class itself, not an object, but a class. So the blueprint, right? Greeting controller. Okay. So first off, before I get too worried about how it's working, I'm going to try to figure out what it's even doing. Like, what's the high level? Okay. Purpose. This is a slice test. Okay. For the web layer using web MVC test. Okay, slice test. I have not heard of that yet. Okay. So it tests the greeting controller in isolation. The greeting controller okay, here's my controller. It tests this in isolation by mocking the greeting service. Greeting controller, greeting service. What is greeting service? Here's controller, here is service. Okay. So I don't think I need to investigate like what, I didn't even know that I had this file like a video ago. So I need to go back and try to figure out what this file is doing. So why it matters, it ensures that your controller handles HTTP requests correctly and returns the expected response. Okay, so back to here. No, this is the get rid of this one, and then so greeting controller is with this one. Okay, so this right here, greeting controller, I'm giving this class, greeting controller class, I'm giving this one, okay, here, and then I will generate a greeting service, okay, greeting service.greet Timothy. Okay, then return hello Timothy. Mock MVC perform, and then I do a HTTP request with this name of Timothy, okay, and I check that the status is okay, and then I check that the content is hello Timothy. Okay. So this is a slice test for the web layer using MVC test. It tests greeting controller in isolation by mocking the greeting service. Why it matters. It ensures that your controller handles HTTP requests correctly and returns the expected response. It avoids loading the full application context by making it faster than full integration test. Okay. So let's write these two questions, and then I think after this I need to dig into how the greeting service, yeah, this greeting service interacts with greeting controller. Okay. So, why does the application context test still pass even if I comment out that run? You're referring to this, yes? What the test actually does. The presence of Spring Boot test, which is the annotation at the very top, tells Spring Boot to start the application context for testing. Okay? It does this independent of my main method. Okay, that kind of makes sense. So if you're commenting out that line, it doesn't do anything. There's no effect. It won't affect the test. Okay, there we go. Because the test framework doesn't call the main method. Instead, it uses Spring's internal mechanisms to bootstrap the context directly from the configuration. When would this test fail? Here are some reasons. A required bean is missing. So a component, service, or repository has a dependency that can't be injected. Okay, so let's let me come here and just get rid of this, maybe? No, I don't think this would cause. Let's see if it does. Yeah, I didn't think this one would, because it's not. It would only fail like if I do the hello. But what if I have this one? Okay, so I'm coming here and I'm trying to get this greeting service, okay? What if I go to greeting service and I just take away this annotation? So I say, no, you don't exist anymore. Okay. Now will it fail? Aha! Okay. So, test run 3, errors 1. So, I remember that I can come in. I am actually going to uncomment that out because if I don't, I'm going to forget where it was. But I'm going to try to find target and then this one. So I'm going to see demo application. Okay, let's see what comes up here. This one looks like these two were not run, I think. This one seems like it is, right? Errors 1. Okay, cool. So let's look into this and see what information it gives us. Failed to load application context for COM example demo application tests. Oh my god. Oh, okay. Test set COM. And where was the one that what did we just take away? It was greeting. It was this one, right? No, it was this one. It was greeting controller test, and that's what I'm trying to find in those in here. Greeting controller. Okay, so caused by org springwork Beans factory, unsatisfied dependency exception, error creating bean with name greeting controller. Okay, so that's how I can kind of find this. Defined in here, greeting controller class. Okay, so that's kind of how I can look into those files there to see what failed. Now I should be able to rerun this, just make sure that it passes still. Okay, cool. So, got that. Okay. So now I'm gonna close this. I don't need this anymore right now. Demo application. Okay, close this one. Greeting service, I do need this one. Greeting controller test. I don't need that one right now. Demo application. I don't need this one right now. Greeting. Okay, these are the three that I'm kind of interested in right now. Okay. So we found out how to make that smoke test fail. Okay. Question number 2. Why does greeting service test work without class level annotation? So it just has that. Why it works. This is a pure unit test. You're not using Spring at all. Okay, so I'm not trying to tell Spring to do anything, right? Like this REST controller tells Spring, hey, this is where you should be routing or finding your routes. This is a routing class, okay? You're manually instantiating the object. So there's no dependency injections. Yep, so no dependency injections or Spring context needed. The only annotation required is test from JUnit to mark the method as a test. Okay, cool. So contrast with Spring Boot test. Spring Boot test is used when you want to load the full Spring context. It's useful for integration tests or when your class dependency or depends on Spring managed beans. I read those words, I didn't quite digest them yet, so I'm going to take a sip of water and then go in and try to digest it. All right. So, Spring Boot test, which is that annotation, is used when you want to load the full Spring context. Okay, it is useful for integration tests or when your class depends on Spring managed beans. So my class here depends on some kind of beans. Okay, sure. So now, okay, so I create this here. Greeting service. I have inside of this folder service a class, okay, called greeting service. And it has a method and it just returns something. Okay. Now, in my greeting controller, I have a class, which is this greeting controller. I annotated it as a REST controller. And I create a variable, a member variable, that is of type greeting service. So I create a class This is a class, and that class has a method, which just returns a string. Okay. So public greeting controller. So here is a method within my class that takes in a greeting service object and assigns it to here. Okay. But this is not a pointer though. How can I assign this dot greeting service to be the passed in greeting service, even though in the declaration of the member variable it is not a pointer. So how can this dot greeting service equals greeting service work if greeting service is not declared as a pointer? Java's object reference explained. Okay, in Java, all non-primitive types like greeting services are references by default. You don't need to use a pointer symbol like in C or C++. Okay. You're declaring a reference to greeting service object. It behaves like a pointer under the hood, but Java abstracts that away for safety and simplicity. Okay, so what this does is it refers the instance variable of the class. Okay. Why final still works. The final keyword means you can assign the variable only once. After that, the reference cannot point to a different object. Okay, but if the object it points to can be modified unless it's immutable. So this is only allowed once, but it would be invalid for me to do it again. Okay. Okay, fine. So then I do these mappings, okay? And do I ever use this greeting service ever again? I think no, but it's just a method that I have in here. So how does that go to this one? So I'm creating that controller class. I create the class, or no, I don't create the class, I just pass it in. And then I private mock MVC, okay. This bean, I create a greeting service, which is that class here that has the method of the greet, okay. I then have a test and when, I don't know what when does, but greeting service dot get greeting service is okay. So I'm calling that method and passing in Timothy, and this will return something, right? Then return hello Timothy. Okay, I don't know what that does. Like, what does then return mean? And now I have another thing that says mock mvc.perform, and I send a GET request to this URL, and I'm expecting that it has this output. Okay. So I'm gonna come here and just ask, can you explain every line of code in here? Okay. So declares the package of this class belongs to. So it helps organize my code to avoid conflicts. Okay, that's fine. Then I will import all of these things. So I'm importing that greeting service, which is this one. I'm importing that. Okay, I'm importing all of these like testing things. Okay. So these are important, or these imports are necessary classes and static methods for writing JUnit 5 tests. Okay, configuring Spring Boot web layer test, MVC test, injecting dependencies, AutoWired, and mock bean. Okay, mocking behavior with Mikado. Okay, I guess that's when. Performing and asserting HTTP requests with mock MVC. So this one right here. So the web MVC test. This tells Spring Boot to load only the web layer controller filters, okay? Not load the full application context. Focus on testing greeting controller, okay, in isolation. So greeting controller test, that's the name of the test. Okay, that's fine. Injecting mock MVC. So I have this, and it says mock MVC is a Spring class that lets you simulate HTTP requests on your controller. AutoWire injects it so you can use it in your test method. Mocking the service layer. Mock bean. Private greeting service. Okay. Mock bean tells Spring to create Mockito mock of greeting service and inject it into the controller. This replaces the real greeting service bean, allowing you to control its behavior on the test. Okay. So now test something throws exception. Marks this method as a test case. Throws exception is needed because this can throw checked exceptions. Okay. Mocking the service response. So this tells the mock greeting service when the method here is called, return the string hello Timothy. This simulates the behavior of the real, so I don't need to actually call. So I'm kind of like telling, like when I call this greeting, I just return this. Well, why don't I just call it? But I do call it right there. Okay, this simulates the behavior of real service without calling it. Okay, so mock MVC performs. So this simulates an HTTP request. It's like calling. Why does it say simulate? Okay, and okay. It seems like you said that I am simulating two things. First is the get greeting response, and the second is the end point of hello2. Okay. So what is being tested? So I'm mocking the behavior of greeting service here. I'm simulating this. Okay, so what's the point if both are simulated? What's actually being tested? You're testing the behavior of the controller layer, specifically how the greeting controller, number one, handles incoming requests, okay, extracts the query parameters, delegates greeting service, returns the correct HTTP response, okay, even though the service is mocked, you're verifying that the controller calls the service with the correct arguments, returns the service's response. Okay. Why mock services? Because this is web layer testing, not full integration test. You want to isolate the controller logic and avoid starting the full Spring context, hitting real database or external services. Okay. What was the name of it? Web layer test. You gave me a bunch of different types of tests. And then, for example, this one. I'm going to say, can you list them all out for me with a brief description? Okay, so what I think I'm going to do is I think I have a lot of homework to do right now. So I'm going to have it list out all of these things for me. So like unit testing, integration testing, application context test, web layer test, slice test. Okay, yeah, that was another one. End-to-end test, smoke test, load stress test, security test, contract test, mutation test. Okay, so all right, I'm going to watch some videos on this. I'm going to go through and try to watch a whole bunch of videos on this and try to get a better understanding that way right now, and then come back to this project once I've got a little bit more exposure that way. Once I understand what these are actually doing, how they're working, then come back to it, back to the project, and be like, okay, what's going on? How is it working in my context? So that's how I'm going to be moving forward. Right now, I'm going to end the video, and then in the next video, whenever that is, once I've felt like, okay, I kind of went through these and understand them a little bit more, I will be back. So if you are interested in that, subscribe and join me on this journey. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the day, and I'm a little bit tired if you can't tell. So yeah, have a wonderful day. My name is Timothy Lee Grant, and I'll see you very soon.